Our reading from the Hebrew Scriptures this morning comes from 1 Samuel chapter 2. Then Hannah prayed and said, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. In the Lord my horn is lifted high. My mouth boasts over my enemies, for I delight in your deliverance. There is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one besides you. There is no rock like your God. Do not keep talking so proudly, or let your mouth speak such arrogance, for the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed. The bows of the warriors are broken, but those who stumbled are armed with strength. Those who were full hire themselves out for food, but those who are hungry hunger no more. She who is barren has borne 7 children, but she who has had many sons pines away. The Lord brings death and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and raises up. The Lord sends poverty and wealth. He humbles and he exalts. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He seats them with princes and has them inherit a throne of honour. For the foundations of the earth are the Lord's. Upon them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his saints, but the wicked will be silenced in darkness. It is not by strength that one prevails. Those who oppose the Lord will be shattered. He will thunder against them from heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed." Our gospel reading is from Mark chapter 13. As he was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings." "Do you see all these great buildings?" replied Jesus. "Not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down." As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter, James, John and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will these things happen? And what will be the sign that they're about to be fulfilled?" Jesus said to them, "Watch out that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name, claiming, 'I am he,' and will deceive many. When you hear of wars and rumours of wars, do not be alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places, and famines. These are the beginning of birth pains."
The day is coming. The day is coming, we are told, when justice and peace will prevail and God's kingdom will be born among us. Sometimes I wonder. Sometimes I wonder, in the light of the world's events and even the way our current social policy is taking us, it can be darn hard to believe, hard to hold on to, hard to hope for, that the day is coming when justice and peace will prevail, when God's kingdom will be born among us. In our reading from the Hebrew Scriptures this morning, we heard part of the story of the sorrow of a barren woman. In the writing of the early church, present troubles are likened to the pangs of labour which precede new birth. Despite the stress and the pain of this moment, there is hope for a better world. That's what the readings remind us of today. Despite the pain and stress of our current situation, there is hope for a better world. One commentary on today's passages says that they point to the present time as a time between the hopelessness of the past and the possibilities of the future. You might also be aware of Dorothy McKellar's poem, My Country. Loved by many of us in Australia, they include these well-known words which describe our country so well. I love a sunburnt country, a land of sweeping plains, of ragged mountain ranges, of floods and droughts and flooding rains. Our country certainly lives up to those words. Many times our country has people suffering from extreme flooding or cyclones or days of torrential rain or severe drought and fires. We all know of those times. I remember one year when I was up at Jamestown, driving up to Orroroo in my first parish. I passed through many areas where there was usually great paddocks of ripening wheat. This time, however, as I drove through, there was none. It was barren. Dams were waterless craters, like visible wounds in the landscape. There would appear to be more reason for hopelessness than new possibilities. But on the way, I stopped for petrol. And I commented to the guy at the petrol station about the difficulties that everybody must be experiencing. The guy behind the counter said, yeah, that's true, but every day brings us closer to rain. He obviously saw the present time as a time between the hopelessness of the past and the possibilities of the future. So back to our reading. The story of Hannah is a familiar one, and it's not difficult to discern the presence of hope that actually resides within it. The background behind the story: Hannah's husband Eli was believed to have been a priest at Shiloh around 1025 years before Jesus was born. So the story had been around for a long time. And Hannah's husband must have been quite well off, since he could maintain 2 wives, a practice that was quite legal at the time. Most of us could never understand why you would want to have more than 1 wife, but they could have 2. And we can see from the unhappy situation that developed why that practice was eventually discontinued. Quarrels and misunderstandings can happen in any family, but jealousy would have been almost inevitable with rival wives, especially if one was capable of bearing children and the other couldn't. Hannah believed her only hope lay with God, and so her earnest prayer echoes across the centuries that resonates with women everywhere who similarly have longed for a child. And we hear Hannah bargaining with God. If a child is born, she vows, I will give him back, dedicate him to God's service. And in the following verses we read that the Lord remembered Hannah, created a wholeness that had somehow been lacking, and she conceived and bore a son, Samuel, sometimes described as the kingmaker for his important role in Jewish history. So out of her experience of barrenness and hopelessness came hope and promise for the future. The same can be true in our lives. In times of barrenness and hopelessness, there is hope and promise for the future. When we look at our world where our hope and our peace and our sense of compassion is shattered by terrorist strikes, we need to remember that even in those dark times, new light, new possibilities, new hope can be born. The Macquarie Dictionary defines hope as the expectation of something desired, a confidence in a future event. Confidence in a future event. Well, how about you and I? Can we live like Hannah with a passion for what is possible? Do we live expecting something more? Or do we live lives that are constantly crushed by what happens to us? You know, the whole point of terrorism is fear. To make us fear the future, to fear anything, to fear that life can occur, to fear our security. And the greatest weapon against that is love, hopefulness, courage, strength, perseverance. They are the greatest weapons against that. We know it isn't easy to live for what is possible. There are so many things that go wrong in our lives that can terrorise us. Apart from world events, it comes right back to, well, not having a job or a job that's changing. I think of all the young people who are involved in exams at the moment who are struggling with, will they pass? What will the future bring? All those who are finishing times in their studies and the future unfolds before them, full of expectations but also challenges. Then there's all those who are struggling with unemployment, all the difficulties that rising interest rates create. They're just some of the things that can affect us. Then there's our health that, you know, we just take for granted for so long in our lives, that can so easily be challenged or shattered. So I wonder then, does our gospel reading for today offer us any hope? When we first hear the story about those beautiful buildings and all the rest of it, and Jesus then tells the disciples, all that you see will be destroyed. It'll all be taken down before you. Nothing will be left. You begin to think, is there any hope? After the temple was destroyed by the Romans and severe persecution of Christians took place, we realise that Mark brought these words of Jesus to the people as words of reassurance and hope. Yes, he said, dreadful things will happen. Wars, earthquakes, famines. We could add other things. But they do not mean that the end has come. They do not mean the end has come. These things are like going through the hard stages of labour before the birth can take place. So the word to these first Christians in our gospel reading today, as to us, is not hopelessness. Rather, it's faithfulness in Jesus. Because when all is said and done, who knows what the future will hold? Which one of us can actually say with certainty what the future will hold? We don't know. But what we do know in the words of theologian Frederick Buchanan is, in a world without God, we know at least that the thing that will happen will be a human thing, no better or worse than the most that humanity can be. But in a world with God, we can never know what will happen. God might even come to us in person. God might even take our humanity and all of its wholeness and brokenness upon himself. God might even laugh with us, or cry with us, strive with us, or suffer with us. God might even die with us, go with us to death or through death. God might even show us in person that sin is overcome by forgiveness, that evil is undone by goodness, that death is swallowed up in the victory of God's grace. Great words that certainly, I believe, give us hope. Give us hope that no matter what happens in life, God walks with us in the person of Jesus Christ, empowering us with the Spirit, empowering us to live with passion, a life that is full of what is possible. So whatever we might be experiencing in life, wherever we might find ourselves at the moment, whatever that might be for you at this time, and for those in our community and in our troubled world who are uncertain and fearful of the future. Today, pray that we might be empowered to be bearers of hope. Pray that we might be people who live into the possibilities that struggle can bring. Pray that tomorrow love will triumph. Amen.